We'll take our mind back to some weeks back where we looked into the issues of the role of the judiciary in having accountability in governance. And that is why we'll also be looking at the role of the legislature in the National Assembly in bringing about the balance and accountability on the executive. And looking at this, we must also stretch out to bring about the separations of power as propounded by Baron de Montesquieu, and also not forgetting that of the rule of law by A.V. Dicey. And that is where we also look at the organs of government, how they can check each other in that regard. The National Assembly comprises of two houses. We have the Senate, which comprises of 109 senators, and of course the House of Representatives, 360 members. Can the 10th Assembly put a check on the executive? We look at the section 4 of the Constitution as amended, and looking at the 99 Constitution as amended, and we also look at that of 88 and 89 that also articulates the doctrines of separations of power as regards the oversight functions of the legislature. And discussing this vital topic with me as we unfold it is a seasoned legal practitioner in the person of Joshua Abolagba. Good to have you join me, Joshua.
Thank you very much, sir.
All right, we took a stretch some weeks back, like I said earlier, and let's look at the role of the legislature. Some have said that the 10th National Assembly could be having it hard in checking the executive or carrying out their oversight functions as regard accountability in governance. With the powers given to the National Assembly on the schedule of the Constitution 1999 as amended, do you feel same or otherwise?
It's it boils down to the applicability of the laws, and that's what we've always talked about, that Nigeria is a country that has laws, and like we always say and reiterate that, in fact, sometimes we feel that the multiplicity or diversity of laws in Nigeria is is far stretched. So it depends on the applicability is where the issue comes to bear with regards to the laws in Nigeria. Most persons are not even aware of these laws, and those who are even aware, they try to circumvent the laws and then do what they feel is right or what will favor them. But so now looking at the Constitution holistically and then taking section 88 and 89, talks about the powers of the legislature
as it relates
to oversight functions, with regards to the executive and the ministry departments and agencies under the executive arm of government.
Both the public and private sector.
Yes, public and private sectors. Even all citizens, are bound by that section with regards to the powers of the legislature to call on any person, parastatal agency or department of the federal government to appear before it with regards to matters that it feels it wants to make an inquest into. That's it.
Okay, let's look at the influence of the executive, because if we take our memory down from 1960 to date, down the memory lane, we look at issues that seem to overwhelm the National Assembly, the legislature, a situation where executive powers are seen to override the powers of the legislature. What do you think could be responsible for that?
Definitely, it is crystal clear that the Constitution, the way it was couched, due to the fact that we are operating the federal system of government, tends to favor the executive, with regards
to be too much of power.
Yes, concentrated the center, both at the federal level and at the state level. So you see that most times the president has quote unquote the final say with regards to matters that have to do with governance and the whole institution as regards government in Nigeria. But if you look back, talking about the Constitution now, Nigeria, we have been clamoring for the constitutional amendments with regards to some sections of the Constitution. So
is it to whittle down the powers of the president?
Not the president, the powers of the executive.
Of the executive?
Of the executive, yes, because you can see...
The president calls the shot in the executive, and that's why I'm looking at him as the arrowhead.
Yes, but then again, there are other ministers and other heads of agencies and parastatals under him.
Okay.
So those persons also have the right to do some certain things as provided for under the Constitution. And so, but then again, the Constitution has expressly stated that in section 88 and 89 that the legislature can give, an order for a person, a particular person or a head of department or head of parastatal to appear before it.
Be it public or private.
Be it public or private, even if it's a single individual. If they feel that you have a matter that has to be trashed out before the house, for the floor of the house, then you will be invited. And then again, the Constitution 89 talks about the fact that if you refuse to appear before it, you can issue a warrant.
Okay.
And that warrant can now be executed by the police to bring you to the floor of the house for you to respond to why the inquest was made.
Okay. Is it right for the National Assembly or the legislature to mandamus the president to the floor of the house? Do they have the powers to do that?
With regards to that, they have the right to invite the president, and definitely the president, in his own wisdom, would really would honor the invite. Yes, because these are persons who have, most times you have a rapport with them already, and then the Senate president is there. He's also a member of the cabinet and everything. So these are things that the president, if he wants to truly do the right thing, will go before them and respond to whatever inquest they want to make. Because for crying out loud, you are the president, so there's a limit to how much they can talk to you or ask you certain things. So in as much as they are trying to do their best with regards to checks and balances, but there's still that respect of the president is before us, so they will not bamboozle you or make a jest of the president. That's the number one person in the country. Okay. So, but they have a right to summon the president, and definitely, I think there's no time they have summoned the president to come before them, and the president has refused to come. Okay. Well,
if you look at the previous administration of former President Muhammadu Buhari, I think we had some dragging aspect of that. Yes. That really did come into fusion as expected. But we are looking at the powers of the National Assembly as regard the 10th, because we understand all of this, even why they were elected into office, in February 25, and of course inaugurated into office June 13. There are a whole lot that has been said as regard the leadership of the Senate under Godswill Akpabio, and of course that of Tajudeen Abbas, the Speaker of the House of Representatives. Now, do you see the courage of the 10th National Assembly in making sure that the oversight functions work in galvanizing, the policies implementation, and of course oversight functions in that regard, for the common patrimony of the people or the people at large? Do you see them as having that courage to go the long way in tackling issues of oversight functions with the executive?
I believe Right Honorable Tajudeen Abbas talked about, recently talked about the fact that the oversight function, which has been saddled on the legislature, with regards to the executive and the departments and agencies, is going to be something that's going to be brought to the forefront of this 10th National Assembly. Of course, yeah. And he said so. So for the Speaker, the Honorable Speaker, to say that in that fashion, so it means that he's actually keen on looking into that, because they know that over time it's as if the populace has lost hope or lost, the hope that they have on the legislature of serving checks and balances on the executive. Okay. So the Honorable Abbas talked about the fact that they are going to work hand in hand with even the populace to ensure that things that are done and the oversight functions that are carried out, the populace are also carried along and know when this parastatal is checked into, or when this thing is when an inquest is made into this particular area or not. Okay. So the Honorable Speaker said that he's going to make sure that happens with this 10th National Assembly. So we just hope that they will stand by their words and do the right thing, because the Constitution has already provided for that and has enabled them to actually do that. Okay, let's look at the nitty-gritty of some of the branches under the executive. Like the anti-graft agency, we know that, and that will be bringing into quizzing in a short while in the course of this show. But let's also look at the aspect of the banking sector, as led by the Central Bank of Nigeria, without making a comparative analysis between that of the previous administration under former President Muhammadu Buhari and the current under President Bola Tinubu. But we have a wide appetite to look at how CBN, was administered in the time of the former President Muhammadu Buhari, how it became like a clog in the wheel of progress to make the CBN governor appear before the National Assembly, before the Legislative House. It was like making a camel to pass through the eye of a needle, which the good book said proverbially that it's difficult to do that. Now let's look at the function of the National Assembly. Can it so do to make the CBN governor appear before it
and even reduce the powers of the CBN governor?
You know, what we talked about is, you know, with regards to where if they can make the CBN governor to appear before them, it is crystal clear, 88, 89. Any person, an individual, any head of parastatal, the agencies, you know, parastatal of government, which is CBN is also one of them, you know, as the financial hub, the financial, you know, arrowhead of the country. So they have the right to summon him to appear before them.
Just like we had Cardoso.
Yes, yes. And so you see that we have to give kudos to the 10th Senate, the 10th National Assembly. Yes, that at least when they give summons or when they make invitations, those invitations are honored.
Okay, but in the previous National Assembly in the 9th, they also made such invitations, but they were not
honored. That's what I'm saying. You see.
So are you saying that is an act of the CBN under the executive, or maybe the head of the executive not, giving that opportunity or making sure that the agency under it respond to the call of the National Assembly?
You know, the thing is that it is one thing for you to, you know, like with regards to the CBN governor, his appointment is tenured. So except there are some things that come up that now makes him not to be qualified to hold the office again. Otherwise, his appointment is tenured. So there's a limit to how you can, you know, summon him with regards to the executive. But yes, how you can tell him go and do this or go and do that. That's why the CBN that we talk about now. Cardoso talked about the fact that very soon, with the way the economy is going, that they might not be willing to give handouts to the federal government again. And you see that that was a point blank statement. Yes, and you see that if
I don't think that would have been able to fly under the previous
administration. So you see that.
So I think that's a clear-cut breakthrough.
Yes. So you can see that Cardoso knows his onion, and also the executive. You know, that's one thing that we also have to, you know.
But is it just enough to talk about it?
Definitely, it starts from somewhere.
See the actions.
Definitely, it starts from somewhere.
How it pans out.
If you don't voice out.
Because at present, we're already having a challenge where the federal government is saying that we need to borrow funds in order to stabilize the economy. So if the president says he wants the CBN to lend, can the CBN so say no?
If the CBN, if they see that at the end of the day they cannot do this, because if they do that, if they lend again, there will be an issue with the country, then they can decide not to lend to the federal government, which they have already said that they if the president demands it, and he has to also go through the Senate.
Okay, yes, of course.
So you see that these are the things that we're talking about. There are checks and balances to ensure that by the time they call the CBN governor and say, why don't you release these funds, and the CBN governor gives ample reason why he feels that the federal government is not credit worthy with regards to getting loans from the CBN, and truly the reasons he gives, they are valid, then so be it. But then again, you should know that the government has to try as much as possible to make room for monies to be made, you know, finances to be, you know, moved upwards, because if the federal government doesn't make money, the agencies, departments, you know, they don't make money for the federal government, then the coffers will be dry in the long run, and you cannot keep on borrowing and then borrow the reserve to oblivion.
It's quite interesting. We're going to be taking these intrigues and suspense that we are having, you know, in the course of governance in Nigeria. Just in case you just watching, as Law and You, and I've been discussing with Joshua Abulagba, a legal practitioner, and I am Philip Omo-Gyukbo, and we're going to be extending the frontiers of this discussion, like the aspect of the powers of the executive to lobby. I know both organs can lobby, you know, but don't forget the facts we have on the separations of powers and how they can check each other. We usually see the powers of the executive, you know, having an influence over the legislature as a result of their ability to lobby their way through the legislature and have their way on. So how do you see this as a setback to the principles of separations of power and checks and balances?
You know, talking about it, if you look at it from the layman's point of view, then you might seem to tag it as a setback. But regards to the view of the politicians and the political commentators, you see that government has been created in a way that it's a give and take And then even those who have democracies that are far, far older than ours still lobby with regards to the United States. So
still lobby.
Yes. So the lobby
in a positive way.
Yes.
Lobby.
Yes.
Is it possible to have a negative aspect of lobby?
Then again, what is lobbying? You are lobbying to get something. So it depends on what the results.
That sounds like graft. That sounds like graft.
No,
although it has a positive connotation.
No.
Lobbying has a positive connotation.
Yes.
But it also has a negative connotation.
That's
maybe
what
when it has to do with bribing your way through.
The end result is what now qualifies it as either a negative lobbying or a positive lobbying. So imagine we are lobbying and they're telling the president or the executive is lobbying and say, okay, if we can get this done, we need so and so, we want to put so and so in place at this particular place, and then the honorable members say, if you are going to have this kind of thing in the FCT, why don't we replicate it in our own constituency also? Okay,
just you're taking my mind to the aspect of the self-appropriating of the budget,
yes.
Of allowances,
yes.
or that of the infrastructure of the National Assembly.
Because
if we look at the increase of the budget of the National Assembly, yes. It went by 147 billion naira,
yes.
and a lot of questions were raised, as in, why should the executive accept that extra increase? What is the justification? So do you see a kind of collaboration? Could we call that a negative aspect of lobbying?
With regards to what the funds were earmarked for, is it actually negative?
It doesn't seem to me like being negative. Because we look at infrastructural development of the National Assembly also.
Yes. So
which seem to bring some honesty, into the figures. But again, there are also allowances.
Yes. But then again,
emoluments.
Yes. But then again, that's what we keep on saying, that in as much as we try as much as possible to, talk from, have an open mind with regards to discussions like this.
Yeah.
But then again, in as much as the legislators, I believe that the country needs a quick fix, and so monies need to be appropriated to them in order for them to be able to live, on par with what they ought to live with.
Looking at the removal of their subsidy, for instance.
But then again,
that they need to also, pace over as a result of the financial difference.
That's true.
In terms of running their day-to-day
office and everything. But then again,
don't forget, it's not just the lawmakers that are faced with that. The entire Nigerians.
That's exactly what I want
to remover.
That's exactly what I want to touch on. That in as much as they have the right now to review the allowances upwards, who reviews the salaries of
the common
Nigerians? So you see, salaries were delayed with regards to the federal government workers. Salaries were delayed for January. I think they were just recently paid in February. So, and then the money is not even enough, first of all. And so these are some of the things that we are talking about. That in as much as the legislators are there to represent the people, they should represent the people creditably.
Exactly why some have said that it seems the organs of government, or the doctrine of separation of power, principle of checks and balances, seem to favor the actors both in the National Assembly and in the executive at the detriment of the common patrimony of the people. Do you concur?
With regards to that, it seems because at the end of the day, if persons can be saying that they need to give the parking lot a facelift and the populace, the masses who are working daily cannot even afford to buy fuel, some persons have parked their cars because they are living far from their offices and they can't afford to be spending 20,000 naira, 10,000 naira in 2 days. How much is their salary? And nobody's talking about reviewing their salary upwards. And then there's also an issue with reviewing. When we talk about reviewing your salaries upwards, that doesn't solve the issue in the long run. Because remember when the minimum wage was 18,000 naira, and then people kicked that it should be increased, and it was increased to about 30,000 naira.
Okay.
And then that 8,000 naira, if you look at it now, as at the time it was 18,000 naira, with regards to its dollar equivalent, it was more than how it is now at 30,000 naira.
Exactly.
So you see that there's a big problem.
Exactly. That's exactly where I said that there seems to be a thin line between both positive and negative lobbying.
Yes.
More especially as we treated earlier, the self-appropriating powers of the legislators.
Yes.
As regards that. Now, sometimes you want to critique the legal jargon, memo judes in cautiously. That is, you can't be, a judge in your own case.
Yes.
Should it not come to play and to the perspective when self-appropriating powers, to the legislature, most especially as regards them reviewing their own allowances and emoluments, and then passing it as a bill, and then lobbying the executive to adopt it, accept it, give assent? Because the NLC and the TUC that are presently, facing this challenge of getting an increase in the wage, they don't have the powers to do that, to self-appropriate, and also to make it a bill and then pass it.
Yes. Yes.
So don't you see a difference, or don't you see a setback in our constitution that we should also give room for a refining or another amendment? Because the 1999 constitution seemed not to be, paving way for an egalitarian society that we hope for as Nigerians.
Some of us have over time been clamoring that the whole constitution should be, reviewed. And when we talk about review, it's not just amendments of certain sections, but a holistic review of the constitution should be made, as soon as possible, because it has now come to bear that the constitution that we currently operate has a whole lot of lacuna.
Let's quickly, before we call it a wrap, let's quickly look at the anti-graft, the fight on graft, and the need for the National Assembly to also step up the game, in order to tackle this. We have the Better Air Juice Gate, the 385 million naira scam, and even the quizzing of the former, minister of that ministry, by the EFCC, talking about the Usman Farouk.
Yes.
That also boiled down to about 39 billion naira.
Yes.
When can the National Assembly also quiz this? Because it's one thing for the EFCC to be doing this, it's another for some of this to be swept under the carpet and then doesn't come to the purview of the public.
The thing is that there is a clear distinction between criminal litigation and civil litigation, and then criminal matters and civil matters. With regards to those funds, they are criminal matters, and so those matters have been tabled before the appropriate body, who is saddled with the responsibility of looking into financial impropriety.
Okay, so you mean it's not the business of the National Assembly to look into?
With regards to that, the National Assembly has already empowered the EFCC.
Okay, but if the EFCC is for dragging, or we are beginning to see delay in justice administration, can't the National Assembly call back that issue so that it can also be looked into, so that we can know the update, or even invite the EFCC chairman, to give an update of those allegations that we heard about and how they are investigating it? Let's get to know. The public demands, deserves to know how that case is going on, so that it shouldn't be swept under the carpet.
But for now, we cannot say it is swept under the carpet.
We don't want to. We don't want to see that happen.
We cannot even say
that's why the media is trying to interrogate to make sure that it's still fresh on the minds of the anti-graft agency, for them to know that the public really are still aware and interested about the pursuance of that case.
The anti-graft agency has to, make its inquest into the matter and then find out what the matter entails.
Okay.
And so they are saddled with that responsibility. Until when that responsibility is carried out and seen to be carried out, then that's what we talk about separation of power.
All right, exactly.
The legislature cannot jump into the arena and then talk about entering into an executive branch, the EFCC.
Okay.
To now talk that you must do this or you must do that. The constitution has expressly stated, and then there's the EFCC Act.
No. The point I'm trying to make is, if there's kind of delayed justice,
would you call it delayed justice
or prosecution of the case?
Then how do you quantify if there is a delay? You cannot quantify if there is a delay. You cannot quantify that.
Time lag can quantify that.
What is the time lag? What qualifies as a time lag?
Well, the constitution have provisions over that.
So you see that at the end of the day, if there is no limitation with regards to how fast you have to prosecute that matter or table the matter before a court, then there's nothing that can actually be done. That's why we're talking about reviewing the constitution. So that
we have a question on that. I think we're going to be having an update on that so that we can bring it to the purview of the public. Big thanks, Joshua Bolagba, for taking our time in part of this, and big thanks, viewers. This is where we suspend at today's edition, but basically we're going to be panning out another topic as an offshoot of this topic, so that we can continue to interrogate the process. We have our eyes on the ball, just as we know you are interested in finishing these cases or seeing the prosecution of cases that has to do with graft and how the anti-graft agencies are working, hitting the ground running, like they will say, in bringing this to fusion. I am Philip Omoro Gupon. We do this next time. Bye-bye.